trip to Guatemala, how Vice President Kamala Harris is trying to stem the flow of migration from Central America. Canadian concerns. The Holy Father weighs in on an issue involving the church in that country. And path to sainthood, how an Italian nun is being remembered tonight. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, June 7, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Vice President Kamala Harris tells Guatemala's president that the top priority for her trip there today is addressing migration to the U.S. April was the second busiest month for unaccompanied children arriving at the southern border, and many come from places like Guatemala. Correspondent Owen Jensen reports from the White House.
Congressional Republicans have criticized President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for not visiting the U.S.-Mexico border, for ignoring what they call a crisis. Now, tomorrow, Vice President Kamala Harris will meet with Mexico's president, but first stop today, Guatemala. Under pressure to deliver results on the international stage, Vice President Kamala Harris in the Northern Triangle country of Guatemala.
We are renewing our relationships around the globe and our presence around the world.
The vice president said people leave their homelands because either they are fleeing from harm or can't satisfy their basic needs. And she said leaders have to convince citizens there is reason to have hope for their families and the future.
To give people a sense that help is on the way. To let them know that they are seen, that they are heard.
The U.S. will send $310 million to provide support for refugees and address food shortages. Also, new anti-trafficking and smuggling measures. In Guatemala, there's widespread corruption to contend with as well.
The underlying reason for so much of what we are seeing in terms of this level and type of corruption is about profit. It is about profit without concern for the damage it creates to real human life.
Meanwhile, President Biden will soon be heading overseas for the G7 and NATO summits, and he'll be meeting with Queen Elizabeth II as well as Russian President Vladimir Putin. And in the press briefing room today, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
And the trip at its core will advance the fundamental thrust of Joe Biden's foreign policy, to rally the world's democracies to tackle the great challenges of our time.
Also tonight, in another sign of a return to pre-pandemic times, reporters who cover the White House, including myself, who are fully vaccinated, can now walk onto the campus without the need for being tested. And in the press briefing room today, every seat was taken, it was packed. In fact, it was standing room only. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The U.S. Supreme Court will not hear a case on the current mail-only draft registration system. The court agreed with a Biden administration request to defer to Congress on the issue. Draft registration is the law for all 18-year-old males, despite an all-volunteer military since Vietnam. Opponents call it discrimination, especially with women allowed in combat since 2013. Well, the U.S. Senate is back from their Memorial Day recess, and now the rush is on to get a number of bills to the floor for a vote, from the China-related research and technology bill to voter reform. But Republicans may cause a few roadblocks. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
What we've learned is not just Republicans who are putting up roadblocks, but West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin has dealt a major blow to progressive Democrats over the weekend. He decided he is not going to vote for S1, for the People Act. He says that he just cannot support it, and it's not the news that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wanted to hear.
At those caucus lunches, it was made clear how important S1 is to the country, to our Democratic majority, and to individual senators. And those discussions are ongoing, and I have a lot of faith in them.
That faith may be running thin after West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin wrote in an op-ed this weekend stating he will not support the voting reform bill S1 as it's written. He wrote, quote, "I believe that partisan voting legislation will destroy the already weakening binds of our democracy, and for that reason I will vote against the For the People Act. Fellow Democrats are pushing back."
I hope he reconsiders what his position is, because this is not about partisan advantage. This is fundamental to our democracy.
Well, Senator Manchin says he supports the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a far less sweeping bill than the For the People Act. In the op-ed, he also emphasized his refusal to end the filibuster, a Senate rule which requires a 60-vote threshold to advance most legislation, writing, quote, "They've attempted to demonize the filibuster and conveniently ignore how it has been critical in protecting the rights of Democrats in the past. Republicans I spoke with applaud the West Virginia senator's actions in support of democracy, while Democrats are calling out their Democratic colleague."
Joe Manchin has become the new Mitch McConnell. And now Joe Manchin is doing everything in his power to stop democracy and to stop our work for the people, the work that the people sent us here to do.
Democrats tell me that they also want to get the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act to the Senate floor in the next couple of weeks. It would challenge China's technological power by giving money to U.S. chip makers. But Republicans are concerned about the $200 billion price tag. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Former President Donald Trump is launching a more active phase of his time since leaving the White House. Speaking at the North Carolina GOP Convention Saturday night, the former president hinted at another run for the White House in 2024 and also vowed to be an active participant leading to next year's midterm elections. The 74-year-old said, quote, "The survival of America depends on our ability to elect Republicans at every level." Joining us now is Jon Schweppe, Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the American Principles Project. John, welcome back. Great to see you again. As we just mentioned, former President Trump spoke at the North Carolina GOP Convention over the weekend. Why do you think he is starting to reemerge now?
Well, I think it's important for him to do these kinds of events. You know, he's been banned from social media and isn't getting a lot of coverage from the mainstream media. So this is really important to let people know he's out there. Donald Trump is back, baby. And, you know, I think that's really important for 2022 because ultimately he is still the figurehead for the Republican Party. And if they're going to turn out their voters in 2022, win back the House and hopefully the Senate, they're going to need him fully engaged and working to get some of these folks elected.
Yeah, and his advisors say that he is likely to make appearances in Alabama and Florida, Georgia, and also Ohio. John, what impact, if any, do you think his presence and support will have on the 2022 midterms and going forward?
Well, I think it's, you know, an important endorsement of what the Republicans are trying to do. As we saw with the Georgia special elections, there was a turnout problem on the Republican side. And, you know, voters are feeling pretty upset right now with the state of where things are going in America. So I think he can use his voice here and get people excited and let them know that a lot of these Republicans who are running, especially some of these outside the Beltway types who are running now for the first time for public office, these guys want to go there and enact his agenda. And I think voters are going to see that and be very excited and very willing to turn out to vote.
As Eric reported a little earlier, Senator Joe Manchin says that he will vote against the For the People Voting Act put forth by progressive Democrats. He also says that he is against ending the filibuster. Can you put these in perspective for us? How big of a deal do you think that is?
Well, I think he's certainly being a patriot here. I think he's recognizing that, you know, America is divided more so now than it has been in a very long time. And he's looking at, you know, what would happen if the Democrats got everything they wanted? Does that really look good for the Republic going forward? I also do want to point out, though, you know, we saw this in 2017 with the Obamacare repeal bill. John McCain famously, you know, gave a thumbs down and took the bullet for not repealing it. And Republicans were extremely upset with him over that decision. But it was reported at the time that McCain probably took that vote for several Republicans who were not feeling great about it. And I think this was probably a similar situation. There's a lot of Democrats who maybe aren't on board with some of the far left socialist things that the Democrats want to impose. And so Manchin is, you know, being brave here, but he's standing up and taking the bullet for him.
Well, John, as you know, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Guatemala today to discuss the root causes of migration from Central America. What do you think will come from her meeting with Guatemala's president? And do you think it will do anything to help stop the flow of migrants to the U.S.?
Well, I think it's good that she's finally doing this. You know, this has been going on for a very long time, and we've heard almost nothing from the Biden administration. But, you know, ultimately, the problem here in the U.S. with all these migrants coming over the border, making this dangerous trek and you know, risking their lives, you know, the problem is our policies. And Joe Biden ran on the idea that we weren't going to have border enforcement anymore. That's been the policy of his administration, and it's creating real problems. And I think it's not fair to a lot of these migrants who are coming over seeking a better life, who are being told one thing and then they get here and it's something completely different.
Jon, we have about a minute left, but I do want to ask you this last question. After the release of thousands of Dr. Fauci's emails from some Republican lawmakers, that is, are calling for new investigations into the origins of the coronavirus, and also some are calling for Dr. Fauci to step down or to be fired. Democrats, however, say the emails show no signs of wrongdoing. I want to get your thoughts on that and how you see this all playing out.
Well, I think the emails were very revealing. You know, Donald Trump actually said this in his speech, that Dr. Fauci turned out to be more of a promoter than a doctor. And we see that in the emails. You know, it's kind of back and forth, a lot of flip-flopping. Masks are good, masks are bad. And, you know, it's questionable as to how he actually did his job. The other thing that I think we're going to really see in the coming weeks is what did, you know, Dr. Fauci know about this gain of function research? Gain of function being the research that basically makes these viruses worse and more deadly. Were we involved in that? Was Dr. Fauci directly involved in that? And so I think there's going to need to be a lot of investigation into this. Republicans are right to put the pressure on the Biden administration to distance themselves from him, and we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, seems to be an unraveling story, so more to come. Thanks so much, Jon. Appreciate it. Jon Schweppe, Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the American Principles Project. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, in Chicago, Father Michael Pfleger has presided at his first Mass since reinstatement. Father Pfleger said that he was grateful to return to public ministry after his January suspension. The Archdiocese of Chicago recently accepted reports of no credible evidence in 3 abuse allegations against him. A police investigation remains open. A collision between 2 express trains in southern Pakistan has killed more than 50 people. The pre-dawn crash injured more than 100 others. Rescuers and local villagers responded to the scene. According to reports, the first train had derailed. The second train, lacking warning signals, was unable to stop in time once the disabled train was sighted. India is grieving those who have died during the recent coronavirus surge. New infections are down and lockdowns are easing, but risk remains in areas that lack testing. A new vaccination drive will begin. India's death toll more than doubled after March 1st to more than 350,000. Pope Francis expresses his pain over the discovery in Canada of the remains of 215 Indigenous students of church-run residential schools. Last week, Canada's Indigenous Services Minister said the church needs to issue a formal apology for the role it played in Canada's residential school system. EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colm Flynn joins us now. Colm, great to see you. So tell us, what did the Pope say about the discovery?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, yesterday, Pope Francis expressed his sorrow when speaking about the news from Canada that a mass grave of 215 children was discovered at a former residential school for Indigenous children. The Pope called the news a shocking discovery, and he urged political and religious authorities to work together in shedding light on what happened. And he also urged them to commit to, quote, a path of reconciliation and healing. The Pope went on to say the sad discovery further increases understanding of the pain and suffering of the past. Now, the Pope did not offer an official apology, something that the Indigenous Services Minister in Canada, Mark Miller, asked him to do last week. And this request was echoed by many on social media. In fact, back in 2017, when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visited the Vatican, he asked Pope Francis then to consider offering an apology for the abuse and lack of care in these state and religious-run schools. However, the Archbishop of Vancouver did apologize officially. Archbishop Michael Miller, he wrote on Twitter, quote, "I am writing to express my deep apology and profound condolences to the families and communities that have been devastated by this horrific news. The Church was unquestionably wrong in implementing a government policy which resulted in devastation for children, families, and communities."
And Colm, for those who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about this school and exactly what its role was?
Well, Tracy, these schools were all across Canada in different parts and were in operation from the 19th century all the way up to the 1970s. And at the time, the school system forcibly separated about 150,000 children from their homes. The system was run by a hybrid of the Canadian government and various Christian churches, the majority of which were run by Catholic missionary orders. The government's policy at the time was to assimilate Indigenous children. And this one school, which is now making the headlines, was called the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And it was in the province of British Columbia in Canada. It was run by the Catholic Church on behalf of the government from 1890 to 1969.
And Colm, finally, what comes next?
Well, Tracy, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that for the country to truly heal their wounds, they must first, quote, acknowledge the truth, not only about residential schools, but about so many injustices, both past and present, that Indigenous people face. The Canadian authorities have been urged to conduct a full investigation into the circumstances and responsibilities surrounding these deaths, including forensic examinations of the remains found. They're also being asked to identify and register the missing children. And speaking from the Vatican yesterday as part of his Sunday Angelus, Pope Francis said, quote, "We commend to the Lord the souls of all the children who died in Canada's residential schools, and we pray for the grieving families and communities of Indigenous Canadians." Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Colm. Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom Correspondent. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, HHS lawsuit. Why a pro-life group is suing the health department over human fetal tissue. And Corpus Christi Mass. Pope Francis reflects on the Lord's love. A pro-life group has filed 2 lawsuits against the Department of Health and Human Services. The Center for Medical Progress filed the Freedom of Information suits against HHS regarding grant applications related to the use of human baby tissue. Center for Medical Progress founder David Delighted says, quote, "The truth about barbaric government-sponsored experiments on aborted children has yet to be revealed." Joining us now is Meredith Di Liberto, senior attorney for Judicial Watch, which is representing the Center for Medical Progress. Meredith, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. Can you talk to us about why the Center for Medical Progress decided to file these 2 lawsuits, and why was it important for Judicial Watch to be involved in the case?
Thank you for having me. Center for Medical Progress has been at the forefront of revealing this barbaric practice in the United States. And they filed 2 FOIA requests last summer, and one was completely ignored, and the other one, they received documents that weren't fully what they had asked for. Being that Judicial Watch does a lot of Freedom of Information Request Act work and our interest in the fetal tissue trafficking issue, we offered our assistance in helping to bring those lawsuits forward so that these documents could be obtained.
And Meredith, can you tell us more about the grant applications, in particular the University of Pittsburgh? What was taking place at its tissue hub and collection site? What can you tell us?
That one, that was the one that the government completely ignored. And so we haven't been able to, we are in the process of obtaining those documents now. There is an agreement by the government. They have decided to cooperate. And so we will have those documents. What the project number shows is that the university is looking to be a tissue hub, what they call it. And some of what they are looking to collect are, human fetal tissue, and the age range from that goes into, well into viability.
And what do you think happens next? When do you think we can expect a ruling on the two lawsuits?
Well, on the Pittsburgh one, we should receive documents in the very near future that we will, the Center for Medical Progress and Judicial Watch will be able to share. There are two document productions. One is due today, actually, and one will be due next week. We will have some documents in terms of the Pittsburgh one. The other lawsuit will be briefed later this summer, and so that one we'll have to wait a little bit longer, but we're going to have to go for the legal angle, which is less exciting to the public, but to argue about the different kinds of things that they withheld from the Center for Medical Progress.
And Meredith, anything else I didn't ask you about these two lawsuits that you think would be important for our audience to know?
I think just it is another step in revealing the fact that the U.S. taxpayers are funding these gruesome experiments. These are coming out of our pocket, and as a tax-paying public, we have the right to know who is being paid, what's being done. As horrible as it may be to be revealed, we deserve to know the truth, and only in knowing the truth can we do something about it.
Meredith, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, pandemic prayers. Pilgrims in Spain reflect on the human cost of coronavirus. And joined with Jesus, the Holy Father describes the power of communion. As coronavirus restrictions relax in Europe, pilgrims are returning to pathways along Spain's Way of St. James. The pilgrimage for spiritual renewal and healing has its roots in the 9th century belief that the tomb of St. James the Great was discovered in Santiago. The medieval cathedral of Compostela is the venerated destination. Annually, hundreds of thousands have sought solace along the St. James Way. An Italian nun is one step closer to possible sainthood after she was beatified yesterday.
Una risposta.
Pope Francis declared Sister Maria Laura Mainetti a martyr killed in hatred of the faith. The beatification took place on the anniversary of her murder in Chiavenna, the northern Italian town where she was killed by 3 teenage girls back in 2000. The Holy Father recognized Blessed Mainetti as a martyr last year. The Pope reminds us of our need for the Lord's presence and love.
Quali sono I luoghi della nostra vita in cui Dio ci chiede di essere ospitato?
During the Corpus Christi Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis said we need to enlarge our hearts to truly appreciate the gift of the Eucharist. The Holy Father underlined that the Eucharist wants to nourish those who are tired and hungry along the way. And finally tonight, Pope Francis says the Eucharist is the bread of sinners, not the reward of saints.
Perché l'Eucaristia non è il premio dei santi. No.
In his Sunday address to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says communion heals us because it joins us with Jesus. It makes us live as he did to help others and to respond to evil by doing good. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.